And she goes on to tell me that when she was about 4 years old, her father was working as a janitor in one of the buildings adjacent to the Pioneer Hotel. She's in the car with her brother, who's about 15 years old. She's in her car seat, and she's asleep. She has this dream that she is actually on fire. And she wakes up just screaming, just having this really terrible, terrible nightmare. And the very interesting thing about it was that she starts describing the dream, and her brother, who had been inside the Pioneer before, realizes that she is describing certain parts in the Pioneer Hotel building that she would have not ever really known before.
Welcome back to Life Along the Streetcar. My name is not Tom Heath. Amanda Mourelatos here again. I am here with Sully McGinnis from Freaky Foot Haunted Tours. How are you doing today?
Really good. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you having us on today.
Thank you so much for coming. So tell me a little bit about Freaky Foot Haunted Tours.
Okay, well, we operate a small local walking tour business throughout downtown Tucson. 7 days a week, 2 tours on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We are in the process of getting ready to launch our mural tour, which will start in September. But right now we've got a really amazing, super exciting, super spooky haunted history tour that we operate about 1 mile throughout the greater downtown Tucson area. So we hit up all of the livelier hot spots that've got great history and great haunted stories as well.
Awesome. And my understanding, you guys started out in Flagstaff and branched out?
We did. Our founder, Susan, and her son, Nick, started the company in Flagstaff just about 10 years ago. Susan wrote a couple of really amazing historical texts about Flagstaff that were kind of true crime related. And then her son, Nick, started the walking tour for her to just kind of keep her busy and have some place to kind of tell those stories. And then it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And the more history that we uncover, we see that history ties itself together through all kinds of cities throughout Arizona. And so we are also blooming to those other cities so that we can talk about Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and Prescott and Flagstaff and Tucson. And that way everybody gets the whole story of all that great history.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're Flagstaff, Prescott, and Tucson. Where do you guys think you're heading next?
Well, signs are kind of pointing to maybe old Scottsdale, but you never know. We've got a lot of tricks up our sleeves being these ghost guys. So
Bisbee's a good one too.
Yeah, definitely. Bisbee, Tombstone, we'll definitely, we'll either be there for tours or we'll be there for special events. I'm sure of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how did you get in the mix of all this?
Well, I kind of grew up in a historic mining town, capital city of Montana, and also went to a private theater school that was integrated in our community theater. And my father was a tour guide when I was growing up. And he would always offer sort of an impromptu tour to all of our friends and family that would come to town. So I really got invested in history and the history of wherever I was living really young. And then when before I moved to Tucson, I got really involved I really wanted to know the community that I was moving to, and a lot of that was history related, and I just really fell in love with all of the history that's here in Tucson. So when I had the opportunity to apply and work with Freaky Foot, it just made a really natural progression, and so it's been super fun to be able to learn more about the place where we live, but also take people on these adventures and teach them a little bit about the place where we live too.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And how long have you been with Freaky Foot?
I've been with Freaky Foot for just about 5-6 months now. So yeah,
Awesome.
we got here in December, and I was we had our first tour guide here, Monk, who's just incredible, amazing guy, and then he can only tell so many stories on his own. So I got come into pinch hit a little bit, and then we've been able to grow a little bit, and the rest is history, so to speak.
That's so awesome. Have you yourself encountered anything paranormal in your life?
I have encountered a lot of paranormal things in my life.
What's
for sure.
what's just one story that stands out to you?
Well, I would say that when my wife and I moved to Tucson, we ended up having a major uptick of paranormal experiences that happened to us both. And we've had some really, we renovated a historic house over in Blenman-Elm. Took us about 2 years to do our renovation, and we had a number of wild and crazy events that took place in that as we've renovated the house. And then I've had some wild experiences in Vail. I've had wild experiences. We just had a really unusual sort of freaky paranormal experience with a flat tire that we got on our way coming out of Picacho Peak not too long ago. And what's kind of amazing, I think, about this place is that, you know, we do this walking tour in just maybe 10 blocks of the downtown area, but you can go north, east, south, west, just a couple blocks off of our tour and find another whole handful of paranormal stories anywhere around here. But one of the more unusual things that happened to us while we were renovating the house was the man who built our house used to work for the Southern Pacific Railroad.
Oh.
And we had all kinds of, anytime that we would sort of talk about him, or we would talk about how he had built the house or things that he would have done around the house, we would immediately have uptick in activity. And what was so wild about it is when we would leave Tucson and we would tell people about him, like sort of in the story of, hey, this is the guy who built our house, sort of a deal, wild things would happen to us where we were. We were up at my mother's house in Seattle, and we were talking about, oh, we're renovating the house, and these are the trials and tribulations that you have with renovating the house. And someone was like, oh, who built your house? So we were talking about him, and we started talking about some of his history just a little bit, and all of the lights ended up going out. And then the same situation happened to us when we were telling the same exact story in Mexico.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so
crazy.
we had to kind of tell him, hey, like, this is where you're at. This is our house now. We had to do a little bit of work to kind of quell things around the house because it was getting a little bit hairy there for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember like your earliest encounter? Were you super young? Or?
Yeah, I was. So my mom and all of my cousins have always been sort of paranormally charged and really into that aspect of metaphysics, paranormal, and things like that. And my family has had these sort of stories forever and ever. Whenever we get together, we sort of go through the first 5-10 minutes of like, how you doing? We haven't seen you in so long. And then our family stories automatically evolve to like, so what experiences have you had lately? Has grandma been by? And we call our grandmother, Mary Jo, we call her mum. And we're like, yeah, mum came by and she da-da-da-da, you know, so it's always something like that. But I remember having these types of experiences when I was really quite young. And same thing with the majority of my family. My dad was a little bit more straight-laced, kind of the history sort of guy, but then my mom and all of my cousins are really into the paranormal. So we always had like a very devout skeptic that would keep everything sort of grounded, you know, like always question the science, but then this other side that was like, science doesn't always have something to do with this, you know?
So you never really had any doubts that paranormal activity existed?
No, it was too active to to doubt, really. Yeah.
It wasn't just like a one here,
No,
one there.
we would get together at Christmas time and pull out old Christmas decorations and things like that at my grandmother's house or at my aunt's house. And I remember being young, and there were like these figurines that were kind of like they had a little music box sort of deal attached to them. And that would just kind of be sitting, as a decoration on the counter or on the table or whatever. And we would start to talk about whoever owned that, who it had come from. And then all of a sudden it would start turning around and start playing.
Really?
Or we'd be at my aunt's house and we'd reference the clock, and then the clock would start chiming. Or she would talk about the neighbor who gave her the clock, and then the clock would start chiming. And this is happening when I was, 2, 3, 4 years old. So it's always been around and always been something that I've kind of had, I was the youngest, and so my cousins would always sort of scare me with it a little bit, like the ghosties are going to get you. So I always kind of had, looking over my shoulder a little bit. But as I've gotten older and older, I've really had the opportunity to appreciate it more and have had more contact with relatives who have passed over, or really interesting experiences with death and grief that have been hard but also really beautiful. And so I've gained a whole lot of appreciation for those stories. And that's one thing that's really cool about the tour also, is that as we're walking around downtown, there's a couple really cool things that happen. Is one, we get tourists that come through, and they love those stories. But I really love getting local folks on the tour, because then they start to, like, as we're walking around, these things jog their memory, and then they start sharing their stories with us. And it seems small, but we're, just these tour guides on these walking tours, but there's moments, these really magical moments where we'll be standing somewhere and someone will tell us a little snippet of their family history, and maybe they'll well up a little bit, they'll drop a little bit of a tear here and there, and we get to have these really special moments where we're excited about the ghost story, but we're also holding the grief for them for a moment, and also just sitting there in the appreciation of like tradition and family and how beautiful that can be, and what an amazing shared connection that can be for people. So yes, we're these history buffs and tour guides, and we're, it seems small that we're doing just these tours, but we have these really special moments with people. And I think that that's what we get to carry with us so much. Yeah,
That's
it's pretty
so
cool.
beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any instances during a tour where someone has had a paranormal interaction?
Yes, we have. And we had a situation just a couple weeks ago. Typically, we don't often have a lot of experiences that will necessarily happen on the tour, but I had a tour just this last week where it was with a mother and daughter, and they together energetically were very, very strong, and they had, really big, fun personalities. And so when that happens, we can kind of get into the depth of things a little bit more. And this girl, she's like 16, 17 years old, and she kept kind of looking over her shoulder a little bit. And we don't really take too much account into that. It's the atmosphere, it's the downtown area. But we start to walk over towards the Pioneer Hotel, and she's a little uneasy, just kind of, and we finish up at the Fox Theater, and then we walk over to the Pioneer. That's our route. And she says, are we going to the Pioneer? And I said, yeah, we're headed over there right now. And she glances over at her mom, and her mom's like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm okay. And we get over there, and she lets me tell the whole story of the fire at the Pioneer Hotel. And that's kind of a tough story for us sometimes. Like, it's such a traumatic situation for the whole city of Tucson, and people really hold on to that story really intensely. She lets me tell the story, and then we're walking to our next stop, and she stops me and she says, can I tell you something that happened to me? And I say, sure. And she goes on to tell me that when she was about 4 years old, her father was working as a janitor in one of the buildings adjacent to the Pioneer Hotel. She's in the car with her brother, who's about 15 years old. She's in her car seat, and she's asleep. She has this dream that she is actually on fire. And she wakes up just screaming, just having this really terrible, terrible nightmare. And the very interesting thing about it was that she starts describing the dream, and her brother, who had been inside the Pioneer before, realizes that she is describing certain parts in the Pioneer Hotel building that she would have not ever really known before. What's wild about this is that we have heard that similar story from another person around her age, another guest on the tour, who was also just around her age and a little bit older. And their mothers were both able to be there to corroborate the story that, yeah, like this was a really big deal, that they were really scared. And this was like one of their first nightmares that actually had really happened. So
Wow.
It was definitely a chilling moment for us.
Yeah.
Then we get back to where we end the tour, which is on the backside of the Hotel Congress. And I'm sitting there telling some of the ghost stories of the Hotel Congress. And all three of us hear this. I'm telling the story of Vince, and all three of us sort of hear this chuckle. And this poor little girl just jumps, out of her skin, and her mom is like, "Did you hear that?" And I'm like, "Did I? You all heard that, right?" And yeah. And so it was just one of those wild things that had just happened to happen on the tour. But some people who are more energetically in tune start to open up some of that stuff, and who knows what happened or what that was about. But yeah, it was definitely
crazy.
Yeah, definitely really interesting.
That's definitely one of those things that you hear about and you never actually witness it yourself.
Yeah,
It feels like.
And the thing too is, like, as tour guides like this, we ourselves tend to be a little bit skeptical of our own stories. Like, we like to say, okay, we want to make sure that our history is right. And as historians, we have to be willing to pivot or realize when more information comes forward that maybe some of our information wasn't always factual or wasn't always right. But when these sorts of situations happen, it's really hard to kind of stay rooted in that skeptic mindset where you're like, that can't be true. That can't possibly have happened. But when it's happened so frequently, it's hard to deny. It's hard to deny. And I think that that's a big thing here in Tucson. It's really rooted in our culture. We have life and death amongst us all the time. It's in our desert. It's in our culture here. It's in our people here. It's in our indigenous people here. And you have to kind of understand that to be able to live here and appreciate all of what Tucson has to offer all of us.
Absolutely, yeah. I grew up here and I completely agree.
Yeah.
What's one of your, without giving too much away, what's one of your favorite Tucson stories?
Well, so I am a huge fan and very honored to be able to steward the stories that we have and be able to share them with people. And one of the things that I'm really most enthralled by is the wherewithal that many of our, whether they were early settlers, whether they were pioneers, or whether they were just townspeople who have lived here throughout time, have had the opportunity to leave us with a lot of really amazing historical texts. And one of those people is a man by the name of George Hand. And George left us with these really incredible diaries, over 20 years of daily handwritten accounts of what Old Tucson looked like in the late 1880s. And I read through those like they are Bible. And so to be able to comb through all of those things and then attribute them to the walking tour also is just really exciting to me, to be able to carry his voice on in this legacy so many years later of like, we have his information and we can still lend our voice to his voice of what he's been able to leave behind. It's really amazing.
That's like the cherry on top, honestly.
Yeah, it really is.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, how can people book a tour if they want to join?
You can check us out online, Freaky Foot Tours. We do all of online booking. You can also call us with our if booking is difficult or not accessible for everyone online. Feel free to give us a call. We'll always answer the phone and be able to get you booked on a tour.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I just really am thankful for the opportunity of you meeting with us today. And the thing that we want people to know is this is our love letter to Tucson, that when we're walking around doing these tours, that we love what we do, we love our city, and we are really just so proud to be able to carry on these stories and carry on this legacy and meet people in two different ways. When we have tourists on the tour, it really gives us the opportunity to showcase what we want people to know about Tucson and what we want people to know about the really amazing people in our community. And when we have local folks on the tour, we get to jog memories and we get to collect a whole lot of different stories of people who have been here for a long time. So whether you're a tourist with us or whether you've lived here forever and ever and ever, we've probably got something that you haven't learned before, and you definitely probably have something that we need to learn to make our tour a little bit better. So we're just very thankful to be able to have that opportunity and work with all of the amazing businesses in the downtown area and all of the neighbors who are around who have accepted us so well, and they start to see our faces and know us a little bit. So we've been really integrated into the downtown community, and we're just so proud to be there.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you. Thanks for
Sully.
having us on today. We really appreciate it.
We appreciate you too.
Yeah, thank you.